Blowing ad budget on metrics that look great till the CFO sees them, that's bull spend. And marketers are calling it out in Dashboard Confessions.
I remember telling my boss, it'll be good for the brand, when leads were slow. Yeah, it wasn't.
Cut the bull spend. LinkedIn lets you target by company, job title, and more. Advertise on LinkedIn. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a $250 credit. Go to linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC. And for a limited time, college students get the best of both worlds. Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Underrated. This is a podcast where we discuss films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have slipped under the radar and passed most people by, or in some cases have passed pretty much everyone by, because today we are going to be starting a new mini-series called Unreleased, and I'm going to be talking about a notoriously unreleased film, the original version of the Fantastic Four. And joining me today to talk about this are a couple movie experts, especially in comic book movies. They are the co-hosts of Movie Smash podcast, and that would be Chris and Jeremy. How's it going, guys?
Oh, it's going great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. We've reviewed one of the other Fantastic Four movies, so it'll be nice to do the earliest Fantastic.
And I'd call us an expert in the field only because nobody else is doing it.
Yeah, I was about to say, Chris, you came on my other show, Infinity Stones Dragon Bones, to talk about the most recent Fantastic Four, the Fantastic Four, The First Steps. So I thought it was a natural fit to have you on here to talk about the earliest version of it. This will be a lot of fun. Before we get into it, what do you guys want to let people know about Movie Smash?
No, it's another movie podcast. Basically, we review movies based on comic books or graphic novels. And it's not always about superheroes. Sometimes we cover things like Rotten Tail.
Yeah, and we try to stay away from the MCU movies, not because we don't like them, but because everyone knows those. So we try to find stuff that's outside the current DC universe, whatever that might be at the moment, and the Marvel universe. So we covered the older Fantastic Four. We haven't covered the new one yet because it still fits in that MCU grouping. Yeah,
and this one definitely would be well outside of that grouping because, like I said, this is it. You know, I put in the title of this episode, Fantastic Four 1994, which is technically untrue because it was never actually legally released. It's the unreleased Fantastic Four film that was scheduled to come out in 1994, but never did. And some people will tell you that it was supposed to come out, but there was quality concerns. Some people tell you this was never actually supposed to come out, regardless of whether or not it was, which it probably wasn't. This was made as a way to extend the rights to the Fantastic Four movie rights. They were due to expire at the end of, I believe it was, or the beginning of 1992. So production on this went into place on December 28th of 1991. Yeah, this is a very cheaply made. Most reports have it being made for about $1 million by the king of making movies quickly and cheaply, Roger Corman. But yeah, this is like I said, never officially released, although it did leak out, and this is going to be the first in the series of films that were not released for whatever reason. And this one was never actually literally released, although you can get your hands on it, you can find it. It is a VHS rip of it made through some illicit sources. But I just wanted to know what your guys' history with this movie is and with the whole lore surrounding it.
So it's a movie that's on our master list of movies that a guest might select. And luckily, no one has selected it. We'll probably get more than that in a little bit. I got a chance to watch. This is my first time actually watching the movie, and I actually watched it off the Internet Archive. So it's on there for free. If you really want to go find it, it's easy to find.
Yeah, I knew about this movie. I'd seen stills and like shots of it because, as we're going to talk about, some of the effects may not hold up incredibly well in 2026. So I knew of this movie. I knew about that it was more or less, the rumor was it was made to keep this license and it was never really supposed to get released. I think depending on who you asked that was related to the movie, they would tell you whether or not that's true, or maybe nobody was in on the idea that it wasn't going to get released but the producers. But ultimately it's more or less finished. I mean, it's not like you're seeing an unfinished movie without things in it. It's done. It's got credits at the end. It has all the effects that are supposed to be in it. Like you can watch it. It's a complete movie. And I guess we'll talk about whether or not you want to.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I did also watch, through just lore, but there's a really interesting documentary called Doomed about the production of this, which I had seen a few years back and rewatched in preparation for this, and they bring back all of the cast and crew, and, they were doing like the circuits on Comic-Con. They, were getting some press through some smaller publications, Film Threat, which I actually worked at for a little while, much after this, of course. Everybody, at least on the production standpoint, was really all ahead going forward and making this movie. They clearly did not have, like I said, they had a very, very small budget to make this big budget action movie, with these crazy superpowers, and I don't think that always holds up, but I think that there was a surprising amount of charm in this thing. It's very B movie, C movie, D movie tier when it comes to how it looks, and even some of the stuff, like I know that the guy who does Doctor Doom, he wanted to do ADR, he never did ADR, so all of his lines are very muffled by the mask. But people are putting in some performances that maybe aren't Oscar tier, but you can tell people had a lot of love for this movie. What did you guys think of the movie itself?
So Jeremy and I sort of talked offline a little bit about this earlier, and Jeremy informed me it was made in 1993 or at this point, and I swear this was early 80s. I didn't know. I didn't see the year it came out, and it really has the production value of a movie that came out, like I said, mid 80s. If you look at it from like a 90s point of view, it's lacking quite a bit, but that was just my initial thoughts.
Yeah, I was like, Chris, you could have told me this was made in 1984 and not 1994, and I would have been like, yeah, I believe that, because we had done fairly recently the Swamp Thing, 1982 Swamp Thing, and I think the effects in this and even some of the camera work is very similar to how that feels, and that's another kind of low budget, based on a superhero, super comic, or comic character movie that I thought this felt more like, even though this was 10 years later. Now, knowing that it was Roger Corman and knowing that it was a low budget, and I enjoy a lot of, B movies are great, bad horror movies are fine. I love that kind of stuff, but they know their limitations. They aren't trying to deal with 4 characters with superhero powers that you need to actually detail. So keeping that in mind, I actually think they did a pretty good job for the first 90% of the movie for making it kind of like it's campy, but it works for me. Like I was still like, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with the fact that, Mr. Fantastic's stretching ability is incredibly goofy. Some of it's camera tricks, some of it's clearly just like a really long stick with a leg on the end they're pushing back and forth. That's all fine. Loved it. Even the Thing, we're going to talk about all these characters, I'm sure, in detail, but the Thing's costume is not as bad as the stills make it look. It's not great, but it's not as bad as I was afraid it was going to be seeing the stills. It's really when you get to the very end sequence of the movie, which we're not going to ruin yet, where the effects, you could tell they've ran out of money to do what would have made that look very impressive. And so some of those effects for some of the character power is not great. But up until that point, I was kind of like, they've done a really good job of making me feel like these are the Fantastic Four characters. I know what their powers are, even without knowing the characters. Johnny Storm can cause parts of his body to catch on fire, and they don't make him a full body fire character until towards the end. Like, they do a good job with their limitations, making the Fantastic Four feel like modified human beings.
Yeah, I've got to say, when it feels more like a pilot for an 80s television series, or it feels more like sort of a student film, if you would. Now, production-wise, Jeremy mentioned The Thing. I think that's where they spent all their money, was on The Thing and his prosthetics, because it wasn't that bad, actually. Like, when they did a zoom in his face, I was looking for the the Turtle 2 effect, where you can see the person behind the mask. And they actually do a pretty good job layering all that material on him.
Yeah, no, I was impressed isn't the right word, but like I was, I was like, okay, they made a real go out with these effects. Obviously the Human Torch stuff, like I said, except for the end, works well enough. the Mr. Fantastic is cheesy. There's the stuff with like the arm and stuff like that, but you do with what you can with that budget, and like I think you said, the Thing was clearly where a lot of the money went. They did have a head that actually moved, like a pneumatic head, I guess, and which like had the movement just like the Turtles heads you brought up. I think it was probably a lot closer to the turtle heads in Ninja Turtles 3, because the first two were done by the Henson Company and the third one was kind of done on the cheap. This was definitely closer to that. They only had money for one body, but they did have two heads. They had one more detailed head, and they had another head that he would put on when he was like running through walls or whatever. But I think the one time that the thing they really lucked out with the superpowers is like, oh, the Invisible Woman. That's a very easy effect to do. Like she's just not there. You just don't shoot her, or you have like show like part of her body faded out. That's an effect that you could do since like the 20s or 30s or whatever. So that worked. But yeah, it did have that. The pacing of it did feel kind of like a pilot. It feels like almost when you watch a pilot for a show that never got picked up, and they're like, actually, this is a movie. Like there was that one where they were gonna make the Aquaman show, and like it was like gonna be in like an early CW show that was at the same time Smallville and like right before Green Arrow. I think it was actually the guy who played Green Arrow. It had that same kind of vibe because there's a lot of setup in this to the point where they like don't really become the Fantastic Four to like halfway through the movie, because it's a short movie and they don't even get their suits till like I checked. There's like 25 minutes left, but I think it does capture the characters well. At least their dynamics between one another. It does a good job of. It is a little bit cheesy. They're like, oh well, Sue is shy, so she's invisible, and Ben puts up these defenses, so he gets the rocks. But I think they do a good enough job with that, with making the characters feel like they all care and know about each other. Especially, I love that you get that kind of extended prologue with Reed and Doom, where they're like these college students and they're like, we're working on this thing together, so that when Doom comes back, you feel some tension. I actually thought that was a really good scene, that last scene where Doom falls off the cliff into the abyss or whatever, and he's kind of taunting Reed. He's like, you don't have the courage to drop me, and he just laughs maniacally as he falls off. There's a lot of bad CG and special effects happening around it and then cutting to it, but I thought that was a really good dynamic that flowed throughout the film, and he was just this really imposing presence. I know that actor would go on to play like Don Draper's dad on Mad Men, so for what it was, I think this movie like largely succeeded. And I think that honestly, I wonder if this movie would be more forgotten to time if it had been released, because it was this kind of forbidden fruit, like, the Batgirl movie, which we obviously can't see, but like the same way that we've seen the momentum build and build and build for Coyote versus Acme, this movie that got Zaslaved and got canceled in the same way that this did. Now we're going to eventually be able to finally see that movie. I think a lot of people were like, what is this movie, this Fantastic Four movie that came out 20 years before any other Fantastic Four movie? Now we have a plethora of them, but for a while, this is all we got. And you had to like know a guy who had like a VHS tape or buy one off eBay or find one at Comic-Con or something like that. I think it's got this interesting piece of comic book movie history for sure.
Hey, Jeremy, it kind of reminds me of we discussed The Spirit. That same sort of feel of like a movie that was made for, in that case, it was actually a pilot for a television show that never got released. And it was hidden away for a while. And eventually, with enough people pounding it on the table, they finally released it to the general public. It has that same sort of feel to it, same sort of quality level to it.
Yeah, this does feel very made for TV. Like, it's a step, I don't even know if I'd say it's a step above. The makeup and the effects are better than the Incredible Hulk TV show, which it was a fun TV show. It's campy, but it works. It also takes some stuff kind of seriously. Like it's not tongue in cheek the whole time. It's not making fun of the property. It takes it seriously, even though it's very limited as what the Hulk, is just a giant guy in green face paint. It's not like they didn't have a big suit for the Hulk. It was just they were like, I gotta be a giant bodybuilder. We'll have him be the Hulk. So this is a step, I guess, above that, because the Thing is not just a guy they painted orange. It's a good bodysuit. But as far as like the feel of it, just the way that the film looks, even the kind of dialogue where it's inoffensive dialogue. It's very much like bare bones. It gets the what you talked about earlier with because Sue's so shy, that's why she goes invisible. Like that's unnecessary. Like it's there and it's fine, but it's almost like we wrote this in case you have no idea who these characters are and why they would have these abilities. We're going to give you that right now. We're going to give you that. Just like there's every time it would zoom in on the thing's face and he would go, "It's clobbering time." Like how many times are you going to do that, buddy? I know you do it in every comic, but still, like you've done it now 5 times. And
Well, I'd also say it's the music too.
Yeah.
Like the music that kicks in every time Sue Storm is talking. It's it swells up in this music of it. So you feel a sort of romance going on. I think it's overscored. To be very frank, it's because it's sort of to fill in the emptiness that the script had.
Yeah, I see it. And apparently, like the composers like paid for the recording studio out of their own pocket, which there was a lot of that, I guess, going on with this movie where they were just not getting money from, it was supposed to be, I guess, half between Corman and half between Constantine Films, who were the ones who eventually had the rights and were wanting to hold on to the rights so they could eventually sell them to Fox, because they obtained them really, like, insanely cheap in the 80s or the 70s or something. But yeah, like, I felt like, yeah, the score in this was there to just kind of like propel stuff, because there's not the effects. There's even that one scene where there's like supposed to be a fight scene, but it just kind of like turns into like a little twirl. They clearly had to fill in the gaps in whatever way they could, because they just did not have the money. And one of the big ways, I think, is we've kind of been dancing around and alluding to, there's that last big effects shot where there's like a laser beam and it's like heading towards New York City. And you have these like it looks like those demos that Pixar did in like the early 80s before Toy Story or anything, before like Tron even. And like the Human Torch is like fighting the laser beam. And it looks rough because this is early special effects. And it's also, they were not giving them any money to do this thing. So it is a little bit, it's a lot dated. It's a lot cheesy. I don't know. What were you guys' thoughts on that kind of, that ending sequence where the laser's shooting and it's all CG insanity?
I played a lot of video games in the mid 90s, and those graphics are better than what we saw there. And my first thought I saw was the Human Torch outruns a laser. I didn't realize he can go faster than the speed of light. I didn't know that was one of his power set, because it fires off and it takes a while before he decides to chase after this thing.
well, not just that,
But it looked
this is
horrible.
the first time he's had the full body flame ability. Like maybe he worked on it at home, but you haven't seen him use it any time other time in the movie. So at this point, he's like, "Wait, I know what I can do," and he immediately just turns into full body flame Human Torch. But again, yes, the effect is very bad. It is just basically like an orangish red full body, like straight from the Lawnmower Man. Pretty bad CG effect that then flies through space and stops it. It's fine. I think the whole ending sequence of this movie is maybe the weakest point of the movie, actually, because I think just the way the whole thing wraps up, just how fast it ends. It's kind of like, we ran out of money, and so this is what we're doing, and that's the end. And that's okay, but up until the last, really the last whole encounter, the last 25 minutes or so, I think this is paced pretty well and actually kind of builds up what could be a better end sequence, and they're like, nah, and here's the end.
Yeah.
So I felt like that was very similar with that end sequence with the Human Torches. They were kind of like, yeah, we don't really know what to do, so this will work.
It's baseball, but so much more. Go bananas for Banana Ball with ESPN on Disney+. The greatest show in sports.
Are you kidding me?
Is the phenomenon everyone's talking about.
The trick play to the plate.
Catch the Savannah Bananas and other fan favorite teams all season long with select games streaming with ESPN on Disney+.
Let's go!
U.S. residents, 18 plus only. Select Banana Ball games available to all Disney Plus subscribers. Terms apply.
Right. It's interesting, and I do kind of like the idea behind it. It's almost like feels reminiscent of like some early Max Fleischer Superman stuff. Like there's that one where he's like punching a laser or something like that. That almost reminded me in concept of that. Like it looks like almost like what you'd see today in like an animatic of like a sequence. But I do agree with what you're saying about the pacing of this movie being surprisingly good. And I think a big part of that comes from a lot of times you see in superhero movies, when they try to overload things with villains, it can become a problem. Right. But I like the way they did it here, where it's like there's these two villains, and they're both like sometimes their interests align where Doom is like, all right, I'll let you steal the diamond because that will cause the ship to blow up, and that works for me. But now I need it, so I'm going to send my goons. There's a little bit of a villain rivalry with the jeweler, who, by the way, the jeweler was made up for this movie, apparently. They wanted to make the Mole Man, but they didn't have the rights to him because he wasn't included in the Fantastic Four character, so that's why they couldn't have Galactus or anything. They could only have Dr. Doom.
Yeah, they Colossus.
Yeah, exactly. The Colossus, exactly. But he sends his goons in, and there's that great beat where, the jeweler has Alicia at gunpoint. He's like, I'll kill her. And Doom's like, all right, do it. Like, I don't care. I really thought that dynamic between, there's these three groups. There's the underground, like, mole-dwelling people. There's the Fantastic Four. And then there's, like, Dr. Doom and his Latvarians. The way all three of them interacted, I thought was a lot of fun, and just kind of shifting alliances. Like, you see the Thing with the mole people for a second, but then he's like, realizes that, his, I was going to say girlfriend, but they've had like one conversation. She says, I love you. But it's like, okay, it's clearly a 90-minute movie. We have a lot of plot. We got to have a reason for these guys to care about each other. So it is a little bit Kitty and Rush, but I liked that. I liked a lot of the dynamics and a lot of the subtle humor in this, where Doom would say something like shooter, or when he came back in after he like sends his goons out to kill them, and he sees the hole blown in his wall, and he just is kind of like, huh. I thought there was a lot of little subtle stuff like that. What did you guys think of all the character dynamics in this?
So the one thing that, and this is early on, Chris was like, that's a little weird. The dynamic between Sue Storm and Reed Richards is a little weird, because the movie starts, like you mentioned, with this kind of, it's not a flashback, but it starts with Victor Von Doom and and Reed Richards working on this other experiment in college, and it goes awry and everything goes wrong. But then Reed goes back to the place he's staying, where I guess the person who runs that, like, boards the house, has two children who are like 10, 11, and he like goes to like pat her on the head or something. She's like, he's dreamy. And then like the next scene is, hey, we're gonna bring them with us into space. And I was like, are they gonna bring an 11 and a 12-year-old into space? Like, why would they do this? Not realizing that much time has gone by, because they don't explain that incredibly well, that it's like another 10, 15 years. So they are adults, but they still live at the same house with their mom, so they can't be too old.
Right. It's a little bit of a weird, you're like, why did he know her when she was so young? Why did you put that in the movie?
I did rewind it, Jeremy, because I missed that too. It does, a little thing comes up real fast. It says 10 years later.
I mean, you can tell, because also he's got the gray on his hair, so he's aged a little bit.
They gave him the iconic Reed gray streaks.
I sent Jeremy a note saying this is a little problematic because he knew her as a kid. I mean, middle school kids having crushes on people in college. It happens. My daughter has a crush on someone from some K-pop band, but you wouldn't expect that person to be, their team lead a few years later, and then eventually marry them at the end of the movie after, re-engaging with them for how long? Like a few months, maybe?
Well, you don't know, because again, thankfully they didn't go into an hour and a half of what Reed Richards did between the incident with Doom and whenever he comes back with this other space shuttle, where he hires the guy that becomes the Thing, Ben Grimm. So it's fine, it's there, but it was like jarring at first when they were like, who are we going to get? And he's like, well, we'll go get Johnny and Sue. I'm like, aren't they 12? Why would you like? And then even if they are 22, 23, they're still like, this is a space mission. You've just got this funding for this space mission you want to do. You've hired a professional pilot, and you're like, well, no one else knows more about this than these two kids. Like, what are you talking about? Why would you have picked these
and
two?
Also, it's obvious. It's also the first time he's seen Sue since she was that really young kid, because remember, the music starts swelling. She's coming down the stairs.
Right.
Reed is a little shocked by how good she looks. So he hasn't even seen these people. He's going to take them on a space mission?
Yeah, when they were 12, they liked space. So it makes total sense to pick these two to go into space for a risky mission.
I think the excuse was like their mom would get mad or something.
It's fine. I mean, if that's our biggest problem with this movie, we're okay. And it's probably not. But that was a little weird. After that, though, once they're in, on their mission or whatever, you kind of forget about that. But it was like when it first started, I was like, ooh, that's a weird way to do this. But other than that, I thought, so the Doom, and I like that they had that first scene with Doom and Richards, because it does give you the tie that they have. And also the fact that he thinks he's dead for 10 plus years, right? This whole time it's not like he visited him in the hospital and he's like, I hate you, Richards. Like, nope, he died. That's it. He hasn't heard from him. But it was still funny when he comes back and he lists himself as Doom, and there's nothing in his head that clicks like, perhaps this is my friend whose last name was Doom. Or even related to the Doom I know.
I think he's supposed to be Victor Vaughn.
Such a common
I think
name.
he's Victor Vaughn in this movie, is the way they he just goes by Doom, like, apparently, you know, like that's I think the workaround they have for it.
I gotta say though, I think the actor who plays Doom in this was having a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, like I want to see. Let me see. I think Joseph Culp. He's great. Like he is this very classically kind of trained guy, and he's clearly having a ball. Like I said, I know he was upset that like a lot of his lines got muffled, and even in that 2015 documentary, he's like, I will still come back and re-record those lines if this ever gets an actual real release and it's not just available, you know, on like, you know, the Internet Archive or whatever. I mean, I would love to see that. Would you guys like to see a proper release of this thing? Not just like it's you know, it's still going to be the same shitty movie, but like, would you like to see like maybe a official thing that doesn't have, you know, the VHS lines and stuff like that in there?
I'd probably go no, just because I've seen it. I don't need to see it again.
See, I think if you make it a double with that documentary about the movie and put them together, then that's well worth it. Like that's a good like comprehensive understanding of why this movie the way it is all together. You don't have to find the documentary, you have to go find a YouTube clip or anything else to people talking about their experience on it. You've got it all right there, and it would be official. I think that's the way you do it.
One thing I did forget was you asked earlier, like, what was our experience with this? And I just remembered a second ago that obviously I think we've all seen stills from this movie over the years. Mm-hmm. But when I went to go see Fantastic Four to be on your show, I saw at the Alamo Drafthouse. They had a little special in the beginning of it, and they had someone coming on talking about how they should make the Fantastic Four, the fourth Power movie. Those are Four Square, that's what it was, and have all the actors from all the various Fantastic Fours and show clips from this movie at that time. Because I remember seeing the wedding scene and the hand sticking up at the end, and that was in that little tiny mini movie or vignette at the preview of Fantastic Four.
Yeah, that would be cool. I like that they actually had all the Fantastic Four actors in that new Fantastic Four movie in cameos.
Yeah.
I honestly could see them having them pop up in like Doomsday, you know, the Avengers movies when everyone's crossing over, you know. I think that's very much in the realm of possibility. Marvel has not been shy about doing stuff like that. Obviously, there was a lot of that in Deadpool and Wolverine, to the point where they even had Channing Tatum show up as Gambit, you know? Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't put it past them. I would love to see, you know, Robert Downey Jr. like have like a one scene, you know, with the original Doctor Doom or something like that. Did you guys think that they might do something like that where they acknowledge it a little bit?
I don't think they will, but it would be hilarious to watch the Fantastic Four rocket land and this team comes out.
Right, not Miles Teller, not John Krasinski, you know, not the guy from 2005, but specifically this team. That'd be
good. Ioan Gruffudd.
Thank you. Yeah.
That would be funny. That would be funny if it was this team. Speaking of the actors in this, other than the guy that plays Human Torch, I don't know if I know anybody else in this movie. Other than at the very beginning, the professor that's teaching Reed and Victor is Commandant Lassard from the Police Academy movies. But I don't know if anybody else in this movie had done anything else I've ever seen. The guy who was Human Torch is it's Jay Underwood, who was the boy who could fly. Yeah,
which is apparently like how he got this. The main Mr. Fantastic, Alex Hyde White, I guess he's kind of like that guy. He shows up in a lot of smaller roles. Like he's got like basically a glorified cameo. Not even a cameo because he, you know, wasn't a person, but he's got like a background role in. You know what he is? He plays in Indiana Jones: Last Crusade. He's you see the back of his head. He's young Sean Connery, but Sean Connery does the voiceover of him. That because I saw him like on the cast list, and I was like, who does he play in that? He's the young version of Henry Jones. But yeah, like he's like
that's funny.
One of those guys. I think these guys are a lot of working actors, you know, for lack of a better term.
But yeah, Jeremy had the same experience when he saw at the very beginning of the movie. My brain screamed Police Academy.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, am I watching the right movie? But then he goes on and he starts going, the speed of light is this, and in kilometers, and he stutters and forgets what it is, and Reed jumping in.
Yeah.
That's to show us that Reed is smart.
Yeah, well, apparently they cast this thing very, very quickly because they needed to they started doing casting, I think, in November, because, like I said, they needed to start shooting in December, otherwise the rights would have reverted. So there was apparently, like, no callbacks or anything. Like, they just were like, okay, audition, and here you go. And it was funny to hear some of the people who auditioned for it, like Titus Welliver, I think, auditioned for Mr. Fantastic, The Thing. And then, as did Patrick Warburton, and apparently for Doctor Doom, Mark Ruffalo auditioned. So, nice little Marvel tie-in there. So what could
I saw that. I'm just surprised Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't apply for The Thing.
Oh yeah. But it's interesting because we talked about, obviously they may go to Roger Corman because they're like, we need to make this cheap, we need to make this fast. Who can we get to do this? Other than Roger Corman, the other guy they went to was Lloyd Kaufman, because they went to Troma to see if Troma would do this, because they also had that similar reputation and had made superhero movies before. But apparently Lloyd Kaufman was not really interested in doing it because he's like, we've kind of got our own superheroes. There's not really a lot of upside to this, because even if it's good, like, people aren't going to love it. It's not our superhero stuff, and it's probably not going to be good. I think he saw the writing on the wall, and I think maybe Roger Corman just didn't care, because he was just like, I make hundreds of movies. This will just be another one that I make.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Troma version of this would have been a different discussion completely.
Yeah, it would have been a very different movie. Are you guys big, like, Corman people? Like, have you seen other of his films?
I definitely have. Like Battle of the Stars, I think is his. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, a lot of these are very much B movies. I've seen a lot of these. Food of the Gods 2. There's a bunch of things listed here that I know I watched a lot of these on, like USA Up All Night, or Deathstalker and the Warriors from Hell. There's one I've actually seen fairly recently, because they put all those out on Shudder. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of movies, probably unintentionally, that were Roger Corman movies over the years.
So how would you say it stacks up to those ones?
I mean, so it makes sense once you're like, okay, this is the guy they've hired to do this. They have a very small budget, although $1 million for Roger Corman is not a small budget. It's
right.
A good
That's
budget
fair.
For Roger Corman.
That's very fair.
To make some movies, but he's also, again, you have to have these 4 specific superhero characters that enough people know their powers. They know what they're supposed to do. He can't go. I mean, he went pretty cheap on some of these effects, but he still, like, kept them accurate, like comic accurate, which is, impressive to have something like The Thing that still works. In fact, my only complaint with The Thing, yes, his suit is rubbery, but it's better than I thought. He's supposed to be so large, and all the other versions of The Thing are, like, huge and much larger than a normal person. This, like, when you see him in scale with other people, you're like, Thing is tiny.
And he's actually, the stunt guy is smaller than the guy playing Ben Grimm. Like, he's like an inch or two shorter. Because he's like, the guy who plays Ben Grimm is like 6'4", and he got cast after the stunt guy and after the suit had been made for the stuntman. So if you notice, he does shrink down a little bit when he turns into The Thing.
It's just like the body size. Like, it's just, he's not, the Thing is huge. He's like 2 times as wide as a person. And it works because a lot of the time he's not with other people, or you see him from, like, he's running in and you see, like, his fist hit something, like, but it's not, you're not seeing just him walk around. But the scenes, like, when they're captured and he's in the cell with everybody else, you're like, The Thing is tiny.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I obviously know the Fantastic Four, but I don't know the entire storyline of them. There's a point where Ben, or the Thing, becomes Ben again because he says he loves this person. Is that a thing in the comic? I thought he couldn't. That was my point. He could never change back.
There have been arcs of the story where Ben changes back to a person. For a while, there was some drug they made or something that let him, like, for one night a month or whatever, he would get to be a person so that he could be a man with his wife at that time. And then I think in a fairly recent one, Doom does something to him to make him a human again, until he gets reverted back to the Thing. So there have been comic arcs where the Thing becomes Ben Grimm again, but it's never permanent, and it's never at will.
Yeah, it felt really quick, and just like they just go back to him being the Thing in this movie, because there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like, this is clearly a movie that needs to, like, it's a breakneck, like, it is well paced, but it is also like things are happening very quickly, and I think they just needed to have that moment to, I guess, A, get him out of there, and B, explain why his power set is what it is, and have that emotional connection between him and Alicia. But yeah, it was very quickly, like, glossed over, I feel like, even in the movie.
I think you're right, though. Like, it has, like, about a 90-ish minute runtime. Yeah. This thing is jam-packed with plot. I mean, you've got that. It's got a massive B plot with a jeweler / mole man, And the Doctor Doom thing it keeps going without a doubt.
Yeah, and you have to do the introduction story.
Well, yeah, you have the introduction, which is good. I liked it, but it reminded me of the 60s Batman show. Like his makeup, the way he was always like in the corner, and all his goons specifically were like kind of clownish a little bit. And like, they had the scene where the two guys from Doom come in to get the diamond back, and instead like everyone else like pulls on these guns, and they're like, oh, like it was very much like 60s Batman feel. But I like that for those scenes. But I also was kind of like, this character in this arc didn't necessarily need to be here, except for that Ben Grimm plot arc where he turns into a human for 30 seconds then back. Like there's not really, it's fine, and it's nice to have the back and forth with him and Doom to kind of make Doom seem like a real bad guy, where the jeweler's just kind of a bad guy. But it's not, I don't know, it seemed a little like if I was going to cut something out of this and add something else, that would be what I cut, is the jeweler and his team. They aren't bad, but they aren't necessary for the ultimate plot. Like the last 20 minutes of the movie, he doesn't matter, he doesn't exist.
Yeah,
I feel like they got shoved in there just to have a reason why that the real Diamond isn't there anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I liked him for his kind of like comic relief stuff. This kind of like goofier character who's like, not the real big bad, but he's still, an opponent for them to deal with. And it does. So, you worry that in another movie it might feel superfluous, but it does tie pretty well into the plot at multiple points. And I think that, that kind of cheesy style of comedy that this is going for, because this movie realizes what it is. This movie realizes we have such a small budget. We have to work with what we have. Might as well do some funny, quick, dirty jokes. I also really like the one where the doctor is interviewing them all, and Johnny uses his power for the first time, and he just cuts back to the doctor, and his sleeve is just slightly charred. I thought that was a really good beat. I don't. Was there any? Do you guys have any other moments like that you liked, or like did you enjoy that kind of tone in the movie?
The whole doctor sequence is great because he does it with everybody. You get to see him interact with everyone and get more and more concerned as he keeps going on. But then every time, for me, it was every time Mr. Fantastic used any of his stretching powers, I laughed every time. But it was not like this is terrible. But it was just the way. Either it was like the most goofy, like, we made a big arm, like what Chris mentioned at the end, when the wedding scene at the end, where it's like he's waving out of the car, and it's clearly just a big stiff arm, but it's all bent up for no reason. But then, like when he escapes from what Doom has them all trapped in, he's like, "I'm gonna get my toe out of this," and then he just stretches his foot around like awkwardly. I love those scenes; they're great because they are super campy, but again, feel like what you'd expect for Mr. Fantastic.
Feels like a sort of a live action, like there was an animated show, and they said, "You know what? Let's make a live action version of this," and that it has that feel of a cartoon. I think you're right, Jeremy, especially at the end when he slides his leg under the force field somehow, and it bends around, and I don't know how that works, but yeah, he definitely made it work.
Yeah, I was like, I don't really understand how he's doing this, but you know what? Sure, I'm down with it. It makes about as much sense as a lot of other stuff in this movie. But
there was a scene where Dr. Doom is going to fight the jeweler to get the diamond back from him, and he walks in. Everyone's shooting stuff, and then the jeweler's goons are shooting him. And I swear that Dr. Doom is just standing there taking the bullets, and then he flexes a little bit, like sort of stretches his chest a little bit, and the bullet ricochets off him and hits one of the thugs. I just had to laugh when I saw that happen. I was like, I don't know if they did that on purpose or not, but it just looked hilarious.
Yeah, there's a lot of good visual beats like that, I think, throughout the course of this movie. But yeah, I mean, any other like final thoughts on the movie that you guys had?
So I guess final thoughts are: is this a good movie? No, it's not a good movie. It is. I mean, it's campy. So if you are looking for something that will remind you of the 60s Batman, or like if you did find that Shadow television pilot that we had covered, it's very similar to that. Like there are some people in this movie that seem to be taking it somewhat seriously, but at the same time, there are things that are intentionally funny that are supposed to keep it a little lighter than some of the other Fantastic Fours that came out after this. It's just the end of the movie. Like literally this is, and it's not just this movie that has this problem. The ultimate confrontation with Doom is kind of a letdown compared to the rest of the movie. I think the rest of the movie is, it has a good tone, it's fun to watch, and it gets to the end, and it reminds me, again, much like the Batman television show, he's like, I can't possibly lose, I've got all these guys trapped in a force field, and, Doom, like, slides his foot under the force field, like, kicks the machine, it spins around and shooting everything. It was just like, it's fine, but it's like, hey, the whole thing wraps up in 3 seconds. Like it, and then it's, well, now this power that the Human Torch has never used, he's going to use now to fly into space faster than light to hit this laser before it hits the city. And it was just like, okay, it's fine. That honestly, I would have much rather had something else as the ending that didn't need that effect, the Human Torch effect. It's so out of place compared to the rest of the movie that it really does feel like, ooh, like the rest of the movie has this charming camp, and you get to that part, and you're like, nope, that's not good at all. So this is not a good movie. The story about the movie, that documentary you talked about, doing some research to learn about why it never came out or what might have happened, why it didn't come out. That's the interesting part of this. And then to watch the movie with it and not get what could be a complete disaster of a movie. Instead, it's a completely passable Fantastic Four movie. But if you'd have told me this came out in like 1983, I would have believed you, because that's the level of effects we're looking at here. In 1983, this would have been very impressive, I'm sure. But it was not impressive in 1994, and it certainly doesn't hold up now.
Yeah, I'd second all that. But one thing I just remembered, there was a scene where the laser is being tested out for the first time, and we see the destruction this laser can cause. That's stock footage of a nuclear blast with a red tint put over it. I've seen that shot in so many documentaries. Mm-hmm. But that gives you a taste of sort of what this movie really is. They were stealing things. They were using things. In fact, the intro scene where showing the planets, I think that's stolen from another movie, because I swear I've seen those shots before.
I mean, they reused sets from Carnosaur, which shot the year before this.
Yes, just to save money. I mean, Jeremy, you keep saying about watching documentary. I think that's really sort of the way to enjoy this, is to watch. I got to go find that documentary, because it might make it a better film to watch, just like to see what they actually pulled off, considering all the things that were against them. If you're looking for a Fantastic Four movie, this is not the one to go see. Right. If you're looking for a good Fantastic Four movie, there are far better ones out there, and there are some real stinkers out there that are still better than this. If you're looking to go get an experience of saying, like, I need to see this, I don't want to say abomination, but this thing that happened, this relic of history of filmmaking, then go see it. Because to understand the lore or sort of the history behind this makes it have more weight than it should. I think, Derek, you were saying if this movie came out with none of the issues it had before it would have just fallen to the waistband of history. We would have never heard about it again. But because of the fact that it was restrained from coming out because they thought it would break the brand, or they never planned to, or what have you, makes it worth more than it probably should be.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even necessarily say more than it should be, but like more than it would have definitely got. And because I think it would have been remembered like the same way that like the early Punisher movie would have been, or like the Captain America with like J.D. Salinger's son in it, like would be like those kind of like forgotten, like made for TV style B-C tier Marvel productions before they started actually making, real movies with like Blade and stuff like that. It would have just been completely, who would have even remembered it? But I like that, because of all that story, you get this kind of like very cheesy, very charming, very, very corny, very campy movie that it's fun. I had a good time. I definitely had a good time watching the doc, and the story of this thing I think is just so fascinating. And I think the story of movies that are unreleased are always very fascinating. It's something that unfortunately we have been seeing more and more of as things are being cut for taxes, as we're seeing. And, I'm going to cover a lot of stuff in the course of this miniseries. This was definitely a really good starting point, but there's also stuff that is made for streaming services that is getting taken off of streaming services that you can't find anymore. There's stuff that is a director had a specific vision for something, and then the film was taken away and someone else finished it. That's been happening, for since in the Magnificent Ambersons, there's films that are just gone. They're just lost to time. Silent films, especially, like 90% of them, I think, are just, you cannot find them. And there's even stuff that just is just not available because of the rights. Like The Fall is one of the movies I'm going to be covering. That movie finally got a re-release from Mubi, but for years it wasn't even in print as a DVD. You could not stream it, you could not rent it, you could not find it anywhere. So I'm really interested in the whole lost media thing, and it's really cool that because of, guys working at whoever managed to steal this, we get this. Otherwise, we would not have this movie. It would be gone, really forgotten, like Batgirl or something like that. We'll probably never get to see that movie. I'm glad we're getting to see Kaede versus Acme. My last question for you guys before I get you out of here is, are there any other unreleased movies that either you're glad are now available or ones that you really want to see that are still not available?
Unreleased ones. I mean, there are movies that I'm not sure they got released or not, but they just like, I don't want to say they're good. Like we mentioned, The Spirit as one as well. Like it was supposed to be released, it wasn't released, and it was a made-for-TV movie pilot thing. Nick Fury with David Hasselhoff. It's in the same sort of ballpark as all those movies. The Batgirl one I did find interesting that it was gotten rid of. Now, I think when you talk about lost media, like there are shows that are disappearing, like Final Space, great animated TV show. And it was also written off by Zaveloff. I think he's killed more TV shows than any person in human history. But those are the first ones that can really come to mind.
I don't know if it's finished enough to share and like see it, but I would love to have seen a more realized version of the Nick Cage Superman. Like that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would have been good or not, but it would have been interesting. I definitely would love to see that. But I am excited for Coyote vs. Acme. I think that's going to be one that. So this movie, even if it would have come out on time, it was, compare it to the other superhero movies from the same time. You've got Batman Returns. You've got like a much better scope of superhero movies that have done very well box office. They are a much better movie that still holds up today. And then this would have come out and been like, ooh, what is this? So I don't think it would have been remembered incredibly fondly. I think Coyote vs. Acme was made as had a real budget. It was made as a real movie. The actors were excited about it. Like this could still be a movie that holds up really well and hopefully will, turn out as good as everyone hopes it will. But I don't think you're going to have the same problem that you'd have if this would have come out officially, which is like, oh my, who approved this? This is terrible. Like there are parts of it that it's, if you're trying to compare it to 1989 Batman, it's not that. It's not that at all. It's much closer to like we mentioned, the 70s Incredible Hulk show or like those Thor movies that came out in the 70s as well. Like that's how this feels to me, but it's a good 20 years later.
Yeah. They were were they kind of like spin-offs of the Incredible Hulk show, I think, where Thor was like
there
a
were
surfer
crossovers,
guy?
definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I mean, and just to give some people, a taste of some other stuff that I'm going to be covering, because obviously, I'm talking about movies that are unreleased or lost media or something. I still have to be able to talk about the movie, so I can't talk about movies that are just completely unseeable, like Batgirl or like these other, silent films that are lost or whatever. But I'm going to be, so like I mentioned, I'm talking about The Fall. I'm also going to be talking about Togo, which is a movie that was made for Disney Plus that is now not streaming anywhere. You have to buy the DVD to get it. There's also Most Dangerous Game, the 2020 version. So that's a movie that is also you can't really find anywhere because that was a movie that was made on a streaming service that only existed for about 6 months, Quibi. So I'm going to have a lot of fun talking about that one.
Quibi.
So it's going to be a whole thing. For the silent movies, I'm going to talk about Eric von Stroheim's Greed, which is, there's still a cut of that movie, but a lot of it's been lost to history. And then Bandersnatch, which is the interactive Black Mirror film, which is all Netflix has taken down all their interactive stuff. So that's a kind of whole genre of movie that isn't available. And then the last one I'm going to talk about is a movie that people demanded to see for years. It was this movie that sort of existed, but it didn't really exist. And finally people got it because of the pandemic. And that's Zack Snyder's Justice League. So gonna be have some interesting conversations, I think. So stay tuned all through June, July, and August. Like I said, leading up to the release of Coyote vs. Acme, I'm going to talk about those films. But yeah, thank you guys once again for coming on. Before you head out, where can people find your stuff and can find Movie Smash?
Sure, if you're looking for us, you find us every other week over at Movie Smash. We release was it every Tuesday, I believe, and we cover a variety of movies, all about based on comic books.
Yeah, the site for that is movie-smash.com if you're looking for that. You can also find me. I do a retro gaming podcast called Retrovania. The Retrovaniacs, actually the Retrovania podcast. And that also is kind of on the other off weeks where I talk about old video games from the NES era on to about the Xbox. So another place you can find me.
Yeah, very cool. Make sure to check all that stuff out. And then after you've checked that out, you can check out some other podcast stuff that I do. Like I mentioned at the top, I also do my show Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones, where I talk about newly released Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. And then I also talk about every other week on Friday on the Midnight Film Society. I co-host that show with my buddy Damien, talking about more recently released things. And of course, there's my Patreon, underratedmoviepodcast.com has links to all of that. The Patreon this year is Minute Deus, where I'm looking at Amadeus in 15-minute chunks. That releases on the 15th of every month. The Patreon is available for that's available for $3 on Patreon, or you can just get the most basic level for as little as $1, which gets you episodes early and ad-free. But yeah, thank you again, guys, for coming on, and thank you everyone out there for listening.
Thanks for having us.